The Penguins will play the Buffalo Sabres in a rematch in their second preseason game on Tuesday night, and Pat and I are going to preview that game right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at SendHimForWet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the Penguins will play in their second preseason game on Tuesday night in a rematch against the Buffalo Sabres. And both teams will be trotting out different lineups compared to what we saw on Saturday. The Penguins, they'll have some more regulars playing in this one, not the big guns per se, but some more regulars compared to the Sabres, who are not playing really any of their regulars at all compared to what we saw on Saturday. That was kind of their A-, B+ team. This is kind of down there, I would say, Pat, their D team, if that. It's mainly just a bunch of kids playing for the Sabres in this game. But getting for the Penguins lineup, they have Rutger McGroarty on the top line with Kevin Hayes and Cody Glass, Anthony Beauvillier with Blake Lizotte and Noah Chari on the second line. Also Jonathan Gruden with Sam Poulin and Avery Hayes. Boca Imama along with Yona Komppanen, and then Mark Johnstone on the fourth line. And then defensively, Ryan Graves is in the lineup again with Jack St. Ivany, Ryan Shea, Sebastian Aho, and then Owen Pickering is with Philip Kral on the bottom pairing. It looks like Harrison Brunick will not be playing in this one for the Penguins after getting some time in their first preseason game. So, Pat, you have some debuts, preseason debuts at least, for someone like Kevin Hayes, Blake Lizotte, Anthony Beauvillier, and the top six, at least for this lineup, that, when the team is fully healthy, makes a pretty fascinating bottom six overall. You know, with McGroarty, he has a good finishing touch. Kevin Hayes, he's the playmaker on that line. Cody Glass can do a bit of both. And then on that other line, you have Beauvillier, who is more of the finisher. Lizotte, he could do a bit of both offensively, defensively. Then Achari, he's a really good penalty killer, decent in his own zone. And I'm very glad also that the Penguins are playing him at wing. He is better at wing compared to center, as I said Monday, and as I've been saying throughout the offseason. So I'm glad that they're continuing that trend as well. Also, we'll discuss this in the second segment. Ryan Graves back in the lineup for a second straight night. I like that they're doing this because you got to build that value back up somehow. And by giving him all these reps in preseason games, even though this one is against a lot of kids and AHL players and junior players, you still got to get him reps anytime you can. So overall, when I look at this lineup, not too many complaints overall.
No, I'm very intrigued by especially that top line with McGroarty, Hayes, and Glass, because I want to see what McGroarty can do with a guy like Hayes, because we all have him kind of penciled in to start in the top six. And while I think he deserves a chance, I also don't think it would be the worst thing to spread out some depth. I will say this, though. The way I look at McGroarty and his development right now is you don't want him to be overwhelmed. You don't want to throw him into the deep end and have him drown. I know that he wants to start his professional career. I know that this was a point of contention in Winnipeg where he wanted to be in the NHL. They said, you're not ready yet, so he wanted to get out. But I do think you give him looks here in the preseason as well as to start the regular season. And if he doesn't work, there's nothing wrong with sitting down with him and saying, listen, we're going to put you in the AHL. We want you to go down there, play on the top line, play 15, 18, maybe 20 minutes a night, dominate and come up, because you're better served to play a lot of time rather than play on the third or fourth line in the NHL, only get 10, 12 minutes a night. That won't help your development. And then when you're ready, you come up and you're going to take big minutes. So at the same time, if you can put him on this line with Hayes and Glass and he does well, maybe you can look at this and go, okay, as we get further into the preseason, start seeing what he can do with 87, maybe see what he can do with 71. And if it continues to work, you're in a good spot. But if he can work well with Hayes, it's a good first step to show, okay, maybe this kid is NHL ready.
Right. And he's had a fine training camp so far. I don't think he's blown really anyone away to start, but it's still early. This is the second preseason game. But if he does go out there, play really well next to Hayes, not only does it show that he could be ready for the NHL, at some point, hopefully for the first game of the season, but it could show that these two have built some chemistry together. Because say, Pat, they decide to start him on the third line with Kevin Hayes. Well, this game could go a long way towards making that happen if maybe he's not ready to play with Sidney Crosby and Brian Russ on the top line. Well, this is a big step here considering how Hayes has been as an NHL player with McGroarty. He's trying to make the team. I'm pretty intrigued to see how those two mesh together overall. And then you have Cody Glass on that line, a player who I'm totally fine with the Penguins taking a chance on during the offseason. Didn't have a good year last year in Nashville, but they definitely see something there considering the way he played a couple seasons ago. And if he's able to at least turn around a little bit, then you may have the makings, of a decent line that you could use at some point during the regular season. I don't know if that's going to be the opening night third line, but they're at least intrigued enough about it that they're trying it out during this preseason game.
Right. And that gets into what I've been saying since the start of camp. One of the things I've wanted to see from Mike Sullivan is outside of the big names, I wanted to see all these lines and defensive pairings in a blender just to give everybody a different kind of look, a different kind of shot, find out what you have in your system and in your lineup. That way you're not locking yourself into certain combinations and certain lines, and you're really getting a lot of opportunity for these newcomers and young guys to actually get a chance to be on the main roster once we get out of camp. And then another player that I'm very intrigued to watch tonight is Sam Poulin, because this kind of feels like the last chance saloon for him. He has had a pretty solid camp by all reporting so far. He's looked good. He's played pretty well. But now that we're going to start playing games, now that we're in kind of the thick of the preseason where we're going to see more game action, he really has to stand out, because it now is officially now or never for Poulin. And if he can't prove that he's ready to be an NHL player, maybe not quite a regular yet just because of the logjam of forwards, but if he's not among one of the top guys that you're going to put in when there's injury or underperformance, it might be time to move on.
Right. This is really sink or swim time for him. I know he only has 6 career games at the NHL level, but I feel like at this point, he kind of is what he is right now. But hey, maybe that can change during the preseason and camp where he goes out there and is able to show what he can do a little bit more. And then, as you said, maybe he is one of the first call-ups from Wilkes-Barre, or maybe he's the 13th or 14th forward when the opening night lineup comes out in a few weeks. But I agree. I think this is his last big shot to show what he can do. Otherwise, I think he's just kind of SOL at this point. He's had chances before with this organization. I understand maybe not as much at the NHL level because he's only played 6 games, but you got to show that you can make this team. And he hasn't been able to do that yet. And with all the players, at least right now, ahead of him on the depth chart, he's got to go out there and really show that he can do this.
He does. And so far, early returns in camp have been solid. He has looked like he's ready to take a step. Does it mean he's going to become a superstar or a top 6 contributor? No, but if you can make him close to a regular bottom 6 NHL player, then you're in a good spot. And that's kind of where he needs to project to at this point, given where he is in his development. And then you look over at the Sabres tonight. This is a complete role reversal from Saturday. They pretty much played what is going to be very close to their opening night lineup when the regular season begins for them in Europe. Tonight, they're getting a look at a lot of the guys. And if you look at the Sabres PR account that tweeted out the lineup for them tonight, this kind of similar to something I was saying going into the Prospects Challenge. You go up and down this lineup. This is a lot of guys with professional experience.
Yeah.
It's AHL, ECHL guys up and down the lineup. So, you look back at the Penguins lineup and you see a lot of these younger players, these newer players. This is a chance for them, once again, to go out and show what they can do against professional hockey players. You're not playing collegiate and junior players in a Prospects Challenge. Now you're playing against a lot of guys who, just like yourself, are pushing to make an NHL roster. So it's another very good proving ground for the Penguins tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And also the Penguins will be going up against two former prospects that used to be in the system in Jack Rathbone and Ethan Prowl. So that'll be fun. I do think the Penguins should win this game, but again, I don't really take preseason results too seriously because I care way more about individual player performances than results as a whole. But I think that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss more about Ryan Graves and how he's in the lineup for a second straight night and how we both think that is a good thing for him at this point overall for his Penguins tenure. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, Ryan Graves in the lineup for a second straight night. This time, he'll be going up against a lot of AHL players and some junior players as well, compared to the other night where he was going up against basically all NHL players as a whole. And I felt like he played fine that game. I don't really think he screwed up too much in his own zone compared to last year because we've talked about this quite a bit. You know, when he would screw up, it would just spiral and his play would get worse and worse and worse. There were a couple times where I felt like he made kind of a questionable play in his own zone, but he was able to rebound off of it in this game compared to last year where he wasn't able to do that. And just to sum up all my thoughts, I am totally fine with him getting another game here because you got to rebuild this value. He was awful last year. There's no two ways about it. And if you want him to get to the level that the front office thinks he can play at, you got to give him these reps. And I understand he is a regular. He's been in the league for a long time, but you got to be giving him these reps and having him start his bounce back a little early compared to some of the other veterans who really don't need these reps considering how great players they are. So I am totally fine with Graves getting another game here, even if it's against AHL players. And honestly, I expect Graves to hopefully dominate in this type of matchup, considering he is a veteran NHL defenseman.
This is exactly what we have been talking about all summer long when it comes to Ryan Graves. The thing is, this is going to be, unfortunately, a project. This is going to be a process. It's not going to happen overnight. We would love for it to. It would be great if he just showed up to camp and suddenly looked like the Ryan Graves that you saw in New Jersey, but unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work. And then he did some interviews with Seth Rorabaugh of the Trib, and he had some really good quotes where he basically said, you know I was bad last year. He copped to it. He said, I wasn't thrilled with how I played last year, and a lot was made of that. And that's not the case. I'm a guy who prides myself in consistency and being reliable, and that just wasn't there. There were good games, there were bad games, and I'm able to look at the good ones and improve. And I know people like you and me, when we have our fan hats on and fans in general, they want this guy to come out in front of everybody and say, I stink, I'm the worst, I was terrible last year. But that's not how this is going to go. He has to come out and project an air of confidence because, like you were saying, and like I have been saying, one of the biggest issues with his game last year was one bad play, one bad moment, one goal against turned into a negativity spiral for his game. He would completely fall apart after that. So if he comes out and says, oh yeah, I'm cooked, I'm terrible, I'm an awful defenseman, we're going to find ourselves right in the same position. But then bringing it back into this preseason, like you said, you want him to play basically every night because you need to rebuild his game. You need to rebuild his confidence, and you need to get him rep after rep after rep. And he is going to probably be stapled beside a rotating cast of Ryan Shea, Jack St. Ivany, Sebastian Aho, all the guys who were fighting for that last defenseman spot. And you want him to find consistency. Maybe not chemistry with those guys, but you want him to find consistency to look like he can fit in on that bottom pairing. And Saturday night, again, you put the results of the game aside. Yeah, they got whooped by the Sabres, but it was essentially the Buffalo Sabres versus the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins and a couple NHL players. He looked okay. And what do we always say about bottom pairing defensemen? You don't want to notice them. Outside of one early goal, I barely noticed Ryan Graves. And that means we are at the starting point of what it's going to take to rebuild him. Now we have to keep building on this. So seeing him tonight in a game where he is likely going to be the top pairing defenseman against what is essentially the Rochester Amerks, you want to see him play very well against this team.
Right. And again, outside, I think of a couple of defensive zone plays that kind of spooked me. I thought he was totally fine. I felt like he was improved with, at least with exiting the defensive zone with the puck on his stick. It didn't look like he was fighting it compared to last year. And I also thought even outside of those couple plays in his own zone defensively, I felt like he was fine in that zone. And it's something to build on for this game. He'll be getting more reps with Jackson Ivany, which I do very much think is going to be the bottom pair to start the year. If I had to make a prediction right now, I'm still going to say Aho is the number 7 defenseman and St. Ivany wins that job. But this allows these two to gain more chemistry in the preseason because, again, I very much think they'll be playing together. And I'm just curious to see how it goes. They'll get top pairing minutes, but against Buffalo's AHL team, they should be more than capable of handling that.
Absolutely. And, before he suffered the concussion to end the year that kept him out of the lineup, he was starting to look like he had a little bit of chemistry with St. Ivany. He was starting to look like he was able to play pretty well in that role. And you figure if he stays healthy, he probably starts rebuilding his game. If this team somehow would have been able to turn it around and get into a playoff round in the first round, he would have been able to keep building on that. And then you take that with some other quotes he had with Seth Rorabaugh, and along with knowing that he underperformed last year, he came out and said that he is motivated. He is very fully aware of the contract he signed, the position he's in. And then you add that on top of Mike Sullivan coming out and saying essentially the same thing, where he's like, Ryan knows that he underperformed last year, but now he's got a year under his belt. He's more comfortable in the organization and within the system. And again, I don't want to oversell this because last year was disastrous, but we have seen countless examples, not just with the Penguins, but across the NHL as well. It takes a little bit of time outside of a few defensemen for them to get acclimated to a new team. It's not as easy to plug and play as a defenseman as we would like it to be. Now, do I think that he is going to completely 180 this year and become the guy he was in New Jersey? Extremely skeptical about that. But will we see an improved Ryan Graves this year? I'm a lot more bullish on that than most. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, you have a whole year of play under your belt, under this system, under this coaching staff. And now you have essentially a coach and a GM who have basically said to you, it's time for you to figure this out or you're going to be in a lot of trouble. The makings and ingredients are there for him to have a better year.
We'll see. That's really all I can say to that. I think it's really just we'll see at this point. I'm a little bit more skeptical than you are about this, just considering how bad he was last year. But again, we'll see, because if he doesn't turn it around at least a little bit this year, I think he's gone.
Yeah, again, I don't want people to like turn this into my meme of being on the president of the Jeff Carter fan club. Like, I am extremely skeptical that he's going to 180, but I think there's a better chance of it happening than there isn't. But at the same time, you never know. Like, this could be who he is now, but very similar to what I've been saying in the offseason about Matt Grzelcyk, where I think the ingredients are there for a turnaround, and we've seen it happen so many times, both in the Penguins organization and across the NHL, that it wouldn't shock me if it happened. And I also wouldn't be surprised if we went, damn, this is just who Ryan Graves is.
Right. And I feel like it's still nuts for him to be worse than where he was last year, but I'm not sure, again, how much better he's going to be overall. I just got to see it to believe it at this point. I'm just excited to see what happens when the regular season comes around. But at the very least, the Penguins will have depth to replace him if he is really bad this season and he has to come out of the lineup for a few games and all that stuff. They have at least a couple of contingency plans, at least for me, on the blue line with, Aho, Ryan Shea, etc. But I think that will do it for the second segment. Coming up to end the show, we're going to discuss more about the power play, how it continues to get a lot of work in training camp, and again, just building upon what we saw during that first preseason game in Buffalo on Saturday. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our next sponsor, and that is Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work using Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. And we're not done. We still got to tell you all about our last sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings just roll in. For example, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. That's 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone once September ends. You can also win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So example, if you want to do Justin Fields over 200 passing yards in the Steelers' next game against the Colts, you can do that. How about maybe Najee Harris over 50 rushing yards that he plays this weekend against the Colts? Go ahead and do that as well. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Nam. So, Pat, we saw a little bit of the new power play look for the Penguins on Saturday against the Sabres in their first preseason game, and I liked a lot of what I saw. I know it's only one preseason game, but I saw, A, a lot more movement, B, a net front presence, and C, more of a shoot-first mentality. All 3 things I have been asking for over a year now, and at least David Quinn has started to implement that for his power play, at least for one preseason game. No one was just playing patty cake at the blue line like we saw last year under Todd Reirden's unit. And in a couple of videos that I saw that were posted on Twitter by some people that were at training camp on Monday when the team was working on the power play with the big guns out there, I kind of saw more of the same. I saw players who were moving around. I saw more of a net front presence, and I definitely saw a lot more shooting on the power play compared to normal. No, people, I am not one of those shoot it people that yell at PPG Paints Arena in the upper stands and all that stuff.
Listen, last year, those people in the upper deck screaming shoot, they were right.
Hey, they were. I don't subscribe to what those people do, but I felt like they had way more of a case last year compared to other years in general. But I at least saw more of that during the videos that I saw on Twitter than during the game on Saturday. And I want to see more of that in the game on Tuesday against the Sabres. Pat, did you see any more improvement on the power play in those videos and just in the game as well?
Well, we talked about it yesterday on the show when we recapped the first preseason game. Puljujarvi's first goal, you have to give him credit for the tip because it was a beautiful tip from the side of the net. He was in the exact right position to make that play, but you watched what led to it. The Penguins had puck movement, they had body movement, and they were, like you said, willing to shoot. And then you look at what has happened throughout practice so far because this week they finally started work on the power play. You saw the same kind of things happen when they were running it in practice. There was a willingness to shoot. There was a willingness for guys to bob, weave, fill in certain spots, and get the puck to the net and exploit the mismatches you can get against an opposing penalty kill. Because if you look at the best penalty kills or power plays, excuse me, from last season, they never stopped moving.
Yeah.
There was no get to a spot. Okay, I'm the point guy. I stay up top. I'm the net front guy. Well, net front guy might not be the best example because net front guy, you want him down there causing havoc. But the other four on the ice are willing to fill in and go to separate spots.
Take the Rangers power play, for example, Pat. You have Adam Fox. He usually runs it at the point, but he's still moving to the right side. He moves to the left side. Sometimes Artemi Panarin comes up to the point and quarterbacks it a little bit. You usually have Zibanejad for the one-timer, but you always have Trocheck moving around. You have Panarin moving around. You have Fox moving around. That is one of the biggest reasons why that Rangers power play works, because it throws off all these penalty killers and it makes you defend so many different areas on the ice. The Penguins, they were so easy to defend because they really only had one area to defend against these penalty killers when they were on the ice. If you want at least an average to obviously an above average power play, you got to instill the thought in the penalty killers that, okay, we got to defend this area. No, we got to defend this area. We got to defend all these different areas on the ice.
And whether your opponent is playing a box or a diamond in their zone, the goal that you have to have as a power play is getting to both mismatches and pulling the defenders out of position. And if you have constant movement with both the puck and rotation, you're going to pull a defenseman out of place. You're going to pull a penalty killing forward out of the quadrant they're supposed to be in the defensive zone. And next thing you know, you've got a 2-on-1 or you've got a clear look at the net. And that's what we saw happen with the Puljujarvi power play goal. Was they pulled the Sabres penalty killers out of position. It led to an open lane for a shot from up top, and Puljujarvi was unchecked in front to make the tip. And if you're able to do that against a Sabres team that, yes, I know people are doubtful about, they have been in the doldrums for quite a while, but there's a lot of potential on that roster. If you're able to do that to a roster of mostly NHL players when you're playing what is essentially your minor league team, once you get the big guns going again, if they're able to commit to this system, that's going to be a big problem because, like you said, and like we have said, the biggest problem last year was it was so stagnant. And I'll say this, there's nothing wrong with a stagnant power play if you have a shooting mentality. If you are forcing your opponent to respect the fact that you're always going to shoot, it's not a bad thing to have a stagnant power play. But they had no willingness to shoot. So it was, like you say, patty cake at the point, or it was passing around the perimeter. And the opposing penalty kill was like, we just have to keep them out of the middle and we're going to block shots. They're going to get low percentage opportunities. We're going to eventually get the puck, clear it out, and they're going to have to regroup. But if you have a moving attack, you have to respect both puck movement, one-timers, the deflections in front, or just shooting in general. So if they're able to commit to this system that Quinn looks like he's bringing in, you might have a power play that is going to be vastly improved simply from the fact that you're going to confuse opposing penalty killers because are they going to set up for a one-timer here? Are they going to have a shot from the point? Are they going to look for a deflection? So you're able to pull them out of position. And I want to see this continue throughout the rest of camp where forget everything you did last year. Don't be stagnant. Don't be afraid to shoot and keep your feet moving for every second that you are in the offensive zone.
Right. And that Puljujarvi goal, I loved it just because, as you said, it was that moving unit. Everyone was moving. You get that shot through. Puljujarvi's able to get the tip. It at least reminded me a little bit of how Chris Kreider gets all his goals on the power play. He parks his big butt right in front of the net, and he's so good at those deflections and those tips. He's just unstoppable from there. And the Rangers are able to just confuse everyone with how they're moving. And then they set up the shots from the point, and then no one can get Kreider out of the way, and he'll just get tip in goal after tip in goal. Puljujarvi, that's basically what that goal was. It was a classic Chris Kreider goal, in my opinion. And if the Penguins can get those types of goals from their power play this year, from that net front presence, whether it's Michael Bunting, whether it's maybe Brian Rust, heck, maybe whether it's Sid, because I know Letang and Crosby love that little shot deflection that they've been doing for so long. I know Carlson also did it with Crosby last year too. And I do think when Carlson's healthy, he's probably going to be quarterbacking the unit. But whoever it is in front of the net, I want to see more of that, as well as the movement on the power play that we saw during Saturday's game. But I do think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another show for you all on Wednesday to recap this Penn Sabres game and go into our favorite individual player performances and also who really didn't stand out in this game. But again, that will do it for this one. For Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll be back on Wednesday.